The storm didn't howl like an animal, it spoke like a crowd. Eamon had lived long enough on the Edgewood line to know the difference. Wolves had rhythm, wind had moods, this white mouth swallowing the pines was all voices at once, shouting over each other, telling him to go back, to be sensible, to let the world freeze without him. He tightened his scarf, lowered his head, and kept walking. The sled rope bit his palm through the glove. Behind him, the half-loaded sledge skated and lurched, its runners hissing over hard snow. He'd cut late because the mill in Hearthrun needed timber before the thaw, and because he was the sort of fool who always said yes when someone asked for one more load. He was halfway between his cabin and the cut line when he saw the dark shape near the creek bend. At first he thought it was a fallen stump. The snowfall thickened in his lashes. He blinked until it sharpened into something wrong, too curved, too deliberate, a body. His feet slowed without his permission. His mind did what it always did when it recognized danger. It offered excuses. Could be a deer, could be a drunk trapper, could be lightning cracked somewhere far off, a pale seam in the cloud belly. For a heartbeat the world glowed blue-white and the shape in the snow was unmistakable. Green skin, broad shoulders, a braid half undone and stiff with frost. An orc. Eamon stopped, the wind shoved at him like an impatient hand. Orcs didn't come this close to the logging line, not alone, not in winter, not unless something had gone terribly wrong or terribly right, depending on who you asked in town. He told himself he could turn around. He told himself this was none of his business. He told himself the storm would cover the tracks and nobody would ever know he'd seen her. Then he saw her hand. It was outstretched, fingers curled, as if she'd been crawling and simply ran out of world. And on the wrist, just above the thick leather binding that looked like it had been cut away, there was a brand, fresh, angry, dark against her skin. A single word in the old border script, traitor. Eamon's breath left him in a tight, furious line. Somebody had done this to her. Somebody had dragged her out into the snow and made sure she'd be found by nothing but wolves, cold, or chance. Chance had shown up wearing Eamon's boots. He knelt, cursing as snow immediately filled the space his body blocked from the wind. The orc's chest rose barely, her lips were cracked. One tusk had chipped, leaving a jagged edge that made her mouth look more savage than it was. Her eyelids fluttered once. When they opened, her gaze locked on him like a snare, not fear, not pleading, calculation. You, she rasped, voice sandpapered raw. Human. That's me, he said, surprised by how steady he sounded. And you're freezing to death. Her hand twitched toward his axe. It was still on his belt. He took a slow breath and held his empty palm up, fingers spread. I'm not here to, he stopped, because he didn't even know what to meant. To kill, to rob, to drag her back. I'm not here to hurt you. Her eyes flicked to his palm, then to the brand on her wrist, then back to his face like she was weighing the value of words in a world that had already betrayed her. Leave, she whispered. If they see. They kill you too. Who's they? She tried to answer and coughed. It looked like it hurt in places inside her chest. Blood darkened the snow by her mouth. Eamon swore again, this time at the universe. He shrugged off his cloak and draped it over her shoulders. Her muscles tensed, but she didn't have the strength to fight him. Under the cloak, she was thinner than she should have been. Not starving orc bodies carried winter well, but worn down by something sharper than hunger. He slid an arm behind her back, testing how much she weighed. She weighed too much for a proper lift and too little for comfort. Strength gone to bone. Don't, she hissed, but it was weak. Either you die here, he said, or you hate me in my cabin where there's a fire. Her eyes narrowed, and for a heartbeat he thought she might bite him just out of spite. Then she sagged. Cabin, she muttered, as if the word itself was a gamble. You risk. Apparently I'm fond of risk, he said, and hoisted her. She made a small sound, pride and pain knotted together, and her head fell against his shoulder. Her skin was cold through his shirt, the kind of cold that made a man's stomach drop. He trudged back toward the cabin, dragging the sled with one hand, carrying a branded orc girl with the other, as the storm tried to erase both of them from the world. His cabin sat in a shallow bowl of pines, smoke-stained and stubborn. It was built from the first trees he'd cut on the line, logs fitted tight enough to laugh at wind. He kicked the door open and shoved it shut behind him with his heel, snow gusting in like an offended spirit. The fire in the hearth was low but alive. He tossed more split wood on, blew until sparks leapt, and the room filled with the smell of resin and warmth. The orc girl stirred, eyes snapping open like a blade unsheathed. Where? She croaked. My place, he said. Don't bleed on the rug. I made it myself. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't turned into a cough. Eamon laid her on the bench near the fire, not too close. He'd learned the hard way that people half frozen could be killed by warmth as surely as by cold. He peeled off her snow-crusted outer layer, what remained of it, and found the truth beneath. Bruises like maps, rope burns, and a gash on her shoulder that had been stitched, then torn open again. And the brand. Eamon's jaw tightened so hard his teeth ached. He fetched water and a rag, and when he returned, she was trying to sit up, refusing to look weak even as her arms shook. "Stop," he said. "You touch," she warned. "I'm going to clean that," he said, and pointed at her shoulder. "If you'd rather it rot, tell me now so I can save myself the trouble." She stared at him like she'd never met a human who spoke to pain like it was a practical problem. Orcs had their own pride, but they also had their own pragmatism, just not in the way humans expected. Finally, she extended her arm in a stiff, permission-like gesture. Eamon cleaned the wound. She flinched only once. When he dabbed at the brand on her wrist, her hand jerked back. "Not that," she said, voice suddenly full of bite. Eamon paused. "Does it hurt?" "It is a sentence," she said. He didn't know what to say to that. So he did the one thing he knew how to do. He boiled water, dissolved dried herbs, and made a bitter tea that helped with fever. He held it out. She sniffed, suspicious. "Poison? If I wanted you dead, I could have left you out there," he said. "Drink." She stared, then took the cup with both hands like it might explode. She sipped, her face twisted in disgust. Eamon smiled despite himself. "Yeah, that means it's working." Silence settled between them, thick as the snow piling against the walls. The orc girl watched the room with a hunter's patience, noting everything: the axe by the door, the stacked wood, the carved runes above the lintel, old ward marks Eamon didn't fully understand but respected anyway. Her gaze landed on a small shelf where a child's wooden figure stood, roughly carved but loved. A little bear with one ear too big. Her eyes softened only for a blink. Then she looked back at Eamon and the calculation returned. "What is your name?" she asked, as if names were weapons and she needed to know if she was being handed a knife. "Eamon," he said. "Eamon Carr." She repeated it under her breath like she was tasting the shape of it. "I am Varka." "Varka," he echoed. "All right, Varka, why are you in my snow with a traitor brand?" Her jaw worked. He could see her deciding whether truth was worth the cost. Finally, she said, "Because I spoke." Eamon waited. He'd learned that silence was sometimes the only tool that could pry words loose without breaking them. Varka's gaze drifted to the fire, the flames reflected in her eyes like tiny wars. "My clan lives beyond the ridge," she said. "Stonejoe, we guard the pass, we trade sometimes, we fight sometimes. Humans say we are raiders, orcs say humans are thieves, both say the other lies. Some of this is true." Eamon snorted softly. "That's the best summary of border history I've ever heard." Varka didn't smile. "This winter we had sickness, not like cold, not like hunger, a fever that took strong warriors first. It came after a caravan crossed the pass, human caravan with bright banners and gold promises." Eamon's shoulders stiffened. "The Duke's men," she shrugged, a careful movement that tugged at her stitches. "Maybe they brought salt cloth iron, they brought also a barrel of wine. They said it was gift. Our chieftain drank first, others drank. Next day 2 hunters collapsed. Next week 7. Eamon's stomach tightened. "Poison?" Varka's eyes sharpened. "Yes, but chieftain's advisor said no. He said spirits angry. He said we had traitor among us who cursed us. He said me." Eamon stared at her wrist. "Why you?" he asked. Varka's voice lowered. "Because I am not only warrior, I can read. I learned from old shaman who traded with humans long ago. I can read your marks. I read the barrel's seal. It was not a gift seal, it was a warning seal." Eamon's brows rose. "What kind of warning?" She swallowed. "In your tongue it means not for sale, not for trade, for cleansing." Eamon's skin prickled. "Cleansing as in disinfectant," or Varka's lips curled, humorless, "as in killing vermin." The fire popped. For a moment the sound was like a tiny bone snapping. Eamon sat on the stool across from her. His hands were clenched without him noticing. "So you told your clan." "I told chieftain," she said. "In private, I said do not drink. I said send it back. I said find who brought it." Chieftain listened. But advisor Krog, he listened too. "Krog," Eamon repeated, filing the name away like a splinter. "He said I insult humans. He said I want war. He said I am traitor because I learned human marks. He said my reading is witchcraft. He said fever is my curse." Eamon felt anger rise like a tide. He didn't like the Duke's men on principle. They took lumber, took taxes, took credit for work done by hands like his. But poison was a different beast. Poison was cowardice with paperwork. "So they branded you," he said. Varka's eyes went distant. "They made a circle. They asked me to swear I did not curse them. I said, look at the seal." Krog said seals lie. "They asked me to confess. I did not, so they made example." Her fingers flexed unconsciously as if remembering ropes. "They banished me beyond the pass," she said, "into winter. Let spirits judge, they said. It is a clean way to kill without blood in the hall. Eamon exhaled slowly as if letting out the weight of it would make it lighter. And now, Varka finished, you found me. If Krog learns, he sends hunters. If humans learn, they send militia. Either way, you have trouble. Eamon looked at the orc girl, branded and bleeding, sitting by his fire like a question the world didn't want answered. Yeah, he said softly, sounds like trouble. Varka watched him, waiting for the sensible choice. Eamon stood, went to the door, and slid the heavy bolt into place. I've made worse decisions, he said, her eyes widened just a fraction. Why? He paused, surprised by how hard it was to put into words something as simple as refusal. Because, he said, someone tried to murder you politely, and I hate polite murder. For the first time, Varka's mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost a disbelief. Then exhaustion took her, and she slumped back against the wall, eyes closing like a door being carefully shut. For 3 days, the storm kept the world at bay. Eamon fed the fire until his arms ached. He cooked stew and forced it past Varka's stubborn pride. He changed her bandages and watched her pretend it didn't matter. She didn't ask for help, but she didn't refuse when it was offered. At least not after the first day when she tried to stand, nearly fainted, and then glared at Eamon like it was his fault gravity existed. On the second night she woke screaming, not in words, in a sound that was older than language. Eamon jolted up from his cot, heart pounding, and found her sitting upright, eyes wide, claws dug into the bench. Don't touch, she snarled, breath fast and ragged. I won't, he said, and stayed where he was. His hands hovered uselessly. You're safe. Varka's gaze flicked over the room as if searching for the circle of her clan hall. Her chest rose and fell, each breath a fight. Safe, she repeated like it was a foreign concept. Then her shoulders sagged. No, not safe, just not dead yet. Eamon swallowed. That's step one, she looked at him. In the firelight, the angles of her face softened into something almost young. Not a monster, not a symbol. A person who'd been thrown away. You have no mate, she asked suddenly, tone blunt. Eamon blinked. No, no children, she said, gaze darting to the wooden bear again. Then why the bear? Eamon's throat tightened. My sister's boy, he said. Milo, he used to visit before the fever took him last spring. Varka's eyes dropped, her voice lowered. Humans lose to sickness too. Yeah, he said, bitter. Sickness doesn't care about stories. She nodded once, slow. Then you understand. Eamon didn't know what else to say, so he did what he always did when words felt too small. He offered the simple truth. If someone poisoned your clan, he said, that's not just your problem, it's mine too. Poison doesn't stop at borders. Varka's gaze sharpened, and for a moment the warrior returned, fully awake. You will help me, she said. It wasn't a question. Eamon felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders like a yoke. He could say no, he could pretend he'd never heard. He could open the door and let the snow finish what the clan started. Instead, he said, tell me what you need. Varka's eyes held his steady, fierce, and suddenly bright with something he hadn't expected, hope, angry and fragile. I need proof, she said. Krog has the caravan seal. He will burn it if he fears. I need the seal and the name of human who brought it. Eamon rubbed his jaw. Caravans pass through Hearthrun. They all file papers with the Duke's clerk. If there was a special barrel, it would be listed somewhere. Varka tilted her head. Paper trail, she said, testing the phrase. Yeah, Eamon said grimly, humans love paper even when they're doing evil. Varka stared at him like she was reassessing the species. Eamon stood. You're still weak, you stay here. Her eyes flashed. No, Varka, he said, and surprised himself by using her name like a hand on her shoulder. If you try to walk to town in this state, you'll fall over and die in a ditch. Then Krog wins, then whoever poisoned your people wins. Stay, heal, I'll go. She looked like she wanted to argue until her tusks snapped, but then she winced, hand reflexively touching her stitched shoulder. Finally she said, grudging, you will not know what to look. Eamon nodded toward the brand. I know what that means, and I know what it looks like when someone wants you silent. Varka's lips pressed into a hard line. Then slowly she reached into the ragged satchel that had been tied to her belt. Eamon hadn't even noticed it at first, and pulled out a folded scrap of thick parchment. It was stained and creased, but intact. She held it out. Eamon took it carefully as if it might crumble. What is it? My notes, she said. Marks I copied from Seal before they dragged me, and the shape of the crest. Eamon unfolded it. There were careful charcoal sketches, lines, symbols, and in the corner a crude drawing of a crest, a tower with a hawk perched atop it. Eamon's stomach dropped. That's the Duke's trade crest, he said. Varka's eyes narrowed. Your leader. Not my leader, Eamon muttered, but yes, his. Varka leaned back, face hardening into something like ice. Then my clan is dying because humans wanted it, she said. Eamon's hands clenched around the parchment. Or because someone using humans wanted it, he said. Either way, we're going to find out. Hearthrun sat like a sore tooth at the edge of civilization, a mill town built around the river's bite, all smoke and sawdust and sharp money. The storm had eased into a steady cold when Eamon arrived, hood up, boots crusted with ice. The streets were busy despite the weather. People moved fast, heads down, as if speed could keep winter from noticing them. Eamon kept his face neutral. He nodded at familiar men. He didn't mention the orc girl bleeding in his cabin. He went straight to the clerk's office, an ugly stone building with a locked door and a clerk who looked like he'd been born frowning. "Eamon Carr," the clerk said when he saw him, "you late on your timber count." "Firewood doesn't count itself," Eamon said. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I need to see caravan ledgers, anything crossing the pass in the last 6 weeks." The clerk's eyes narrowed. "That's not your business." Eamon slid a small silver coin onto the counter, not enough for bribery in the city, but in Hearthrun, where silver was rarer than kindness, it was persuasive. The clerk glanced at it, then at Eamon. "Why?" "Because," Eamon said, "if there's trouble at the pass, the mill won't get its iron and the duke won't get his tax, and you won't get paid." The clerk hesitated. Greed wrestled with caution. Greed won. He unlocked a drawer, pulled out a ledger, and flipped pages with the weariness of a man flipping his own fate. 6 weeks, he muttered. Caravans 3, one from Eastmere, one from the Duke's storehouses, one independent. Eamon leaned closer. The Duke's storehouses, what did it carry? The clerk scanned. His finger paused. Salt, cloth, iron nails, wine barrel marked. Eamon's pulse thudded. Marked what? He asked. The clerk squinted. It says for cleansing. That's odd. Eamon forced his face to stay calm. Who signed it out? The clerk ran a finger down the margin. Quartermaster Haven, approved by Lord Warwick. Eamon's mouth went dry. Lord Warwick was the Duke's advisor, the man who smiled with his teeth and never with his eyes. And who led the caravan? Eamon asked. Captain Sorn, the clerk said, Duke's guard. Eamon felt something cold settle in his gut. Names, proof, but names could still be denied, twisted, buried under paperwork and power. Took the ledger just for a heartbeat, enough to see the crest stamped beside the entry. Tower and Hawk, real ink, real authority. He handed it back. The clerk watched him, unease creeping into his frown. You didn't hear this from me. I hear nothing, Eamon said and slid the coin toward him. For your troubles. As he turned to leave, a voice behind him said, Eamon Carr. He froze. Slowly, he turned. Lord Warwick stood in the doorway like he'd been waiting there for years. Fine cloak, clean boots. A smile sharp enough to shave with. You're asking interesting questions, Warwick said. Eamon forced himself to breathe. Just doing my part to keep the mill running. Warwick's gaze drifted to the clerk, then back. Of course, and the past, the orcs, do they trouble you? No more than winter does, Eamon said. Warwick stepped closer, lowering his voice like they were sharing a joke. Winter can be managed with the right tools, with the right cleansing. Eamon's hand itched for his axe. He kept it still. Warwick's eyes gleamed. If you hear of any unusual strays in the snow, he said, it would be wise to report them. The Duke values loyalty. Eamon met his gaze. I'll keep my eyes open. Warwick smiled wider, satisfied, and swept out like a man who'd already won. Eamon waited until the clerk's trembling stopped, then left. Outside, the cold felt honest compared to the warmth of that office. He walked fast, mind racing. He had proof the Duke's crest marked the barrel. He had names tied to the paper trail. But if he marched into the council hall with that, he'd be laughed out or quietly disappeared. He needed something the Duke couldn't ignore. He needed the pass itself, and he needed Varka on her feet. When he returned to the cabin, the first thing he noticed was the silence, not peaceful silence, the kind that meant the world was holding its breath. He pushed the door open, axe already in his hand. Inside, the fire burned low. Snow drifted in a thin line across the floor. Someone had opened the door. Eamon's heart slammed into his ribs. Varka, he called, no answer. Then a shape moved in the corner, a shadow with 2 broad shoulders. Eamon swung the axe up. A figure stepped into the firelight, orc male, big enough to make Eamon's cabin look smaller. He raised both hands, palms open. I am not here to fight, the orc said in careful, accented human tongue. I am here to retrieve what was stolen. Behind him, Varka stood, wobbling but upright. Her eyes were fierce. Eamon's relief and anger collided. You brought him here, he demanded. Varka's jaw tightened. He tracked, not me. The male orc's gaze swept the room, taking in the ward runes, the axe, the human stance. You shelter traitor, he rumbled. Eamon stepped in front of Varka without thinking. I shelter a wounded person. The orc's nostrils flared, his gaze dropped to the brand on Varka's wrist. Something like regret flickered across his face, quickly buried. Varka, he said, voice lower, come back. Krog says you can be forgiven if you confess. Varka laughed, harsh and short. Forgiven after death, perhaps. He sends you because you are my cousin and he thinks I will listen. The orc's jaw clenched. You shame us. No, Varka snapped. I warned us. The male orc glanced at Eamon again, as if considering whether to crush him and be done with it. Instead, he said, Krog says humans poisoned us because you spoke to them. Eamon's stomach turned. That's a lie. The male orc's eyes narrowed. Of course human says this. Varka stepped forward, shoulders squared despite the pain. Tell me, Raln, she said, how many have died since I was cast out? Raln's throat worked. He didn't answer quickly enough. Varka's voice softened, and somehow that was worse. You were there when I read the seal, she said. You saw the mark, you know I did not invent it. Raln's gaze flickered, doubt cracking through the loyalty like ice underfoot. Eamon took the parchment from his pocket, Varka's notes, the crest sketch, and held it out. I went to town, he said. I saw the ledger, it's real Duke's crest, for cleansing. Raln stared at the paper as if it were a snake, his nostrils flared. If this is true, it is, Varka said. Raln's face tightened. Then Krog is not only liar, he is ambitious, Varka finished. He wants chieftain weak, he wants war. He wants humans to march, and he wants to be the one who leads the fight. Raln's hands curled into fists. He will kill you. He already tried, Varka said, lifting her wrist so the brand caught the firelight. He will kill more unless we stop him. Raln looked at Eamon. Something in his expression shifted, an unfamiliar thing like respect pressed reluctantly through suspicion. You, he said to Eamon, if you go with her, humans may think you traitor too. Eamon snorted. Join the club. Varka's eyes darted to him, and for a heartbeat her fierce mask slipped, revealing something like gratitude that she didn't know how to hold. Raln exhaled long and heavy. Come, he said finally. If you have proof, we take it to the chieftain. Krog cannot silence all. Varka nodded. We go at dawn. Eamon's hands tightened on his axe. Dawn meant risk. Dawn meant stepping into a story bigger than his cabin, bigger than his life. He glanced at the wooden bear on the shelf, and for a moment Milo's laugh echoed in his mind, bright and gone. He looked back at Varka, branded, banished, still standing. All right, he said. Dawn. They crossed the ridge under a sky like hammered iron. Raln moved like a boulder rolling downhill, inevitable. Varka moved slower, injury forcing her to lean on a staff Eamon carved for her from ash wood. She hated the staff, she used it anyway. Eamon stayed close, axe over his shoulder, eyes scanning for movement among the pines. Twice he saw tracks, too many feet, too organized, hunters. They follow, Varka murmured. Raln's jaw tightened. Krog sends wolves. Eamon spat into the snow. Then we don't let them bite. They reached Stonejaw's territory at dusk. The pass narrowed here, cliffs rising like teeth. Smoke curled from cave mouths and stone huts wedged into the slope. Guards spotted them and raised spears. Varka stepped forward, lifting her branded wrist. The guard's eyes widened, murmurs rippled like a quickening storm. Traitor, one hissed. Varka's voice cut through the air. I demand clan law, she said. I demand the chieftain hear my words before spirits. The guards hesitated. Clan law was older than Krog, older than the chieftain, older than fear. Raln barked an order in orc tongue, and the spears lowered barely. They were escorted into the main hall, a cavern lit by torches and hearth fires. The smell hit Eamon first, smoke, sweat-cured meat, and the metallic tang of sickness. Orcs lay on furs near the walls, faces drawn, eyes dull with fever, warriors who looked like they'd rather face blades than the slow, invisible enemy. At the far end sat the chieftain, broad, heavy, his skin sallow under his tattoos. Beside him stood Krog. Krog was smaller than most orcs, but his presence filled the space like poison gas. His eyes were sharp, his smile too smooth. When he saw Varka, his smile widened. Look, Krog said, voice carrying, the spirit judged returns, and she brings a pet human. A growl ran through the hall, spears shifted, hands gripped hilts. Eamon's pulse hammered, but he stood his ground. He'd faced falling trees and snapping ropes and winter nights with no fire. He could face a room of angry orcs so long as his knees didn't decide to betray him. Varka stepped forward, chin high. I bring truth, she said, and proof. Krog laughed. Proof from a branded liar. Varka raised the parchment. I read the seal on the barrel that brought sickness. It bore human mark. For cleansing, I copied it. This human confirmed it in your town ledger. Krog's eyes flicked just once toward Eamon, calculation, then Krog's voice rose, theatrical. A human ledger, a human mark, of course the human will say whatever saves his skin. They have poisoned us, yes, and this traitor helped them, learning their scratches, hiding among them like a rat. The crowd roared. Eamon stepped forward before he could think better. If you were so sure she helped humans, he shouted over the noise, why banish her instead of killing her? Why let a traitor live at all? The hall quieted in a startled wave. Krog's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. Because our clan is just, he purred. We let spirits judge. Or because you didn't want her blood on your hands, Eamon snapped. Because if she died in this hall, someone might ask why. Murmurs rose again, different now, uncertain. Varka's voice cut through, steady. Krog, she said, bring the barrel seal, show the clan, if I lie, kill me here. The challenge hung in the air like an axe poised mid-swing. Krog's eyes narrowed. The seal was destroyed, he said smoothly, to prevent further curse. A low rumble of discontent moved through the hall. Varka's gaze didn't waver. Destroyed conveniently, she said. Krog's nostrils flared. Enough, he snapped, a crack in the smoothness. He turned to the chieftain. Chieftain, she insults our law, let me finish what you began. The chieftain lifted a heavy hand and the hall quieted again. His voice was rough, worn by fever. Varka, he said, eyes tired. Why return? Varka stepped closer and Eamon saw it, the tremor in her legs, the pain she was swallowing. Still she stood. Because our people die, she said. Because you taught me strength is to protect, not to posture. Because if I die, I want my death to mean something more than Krog's ambition. The word ambition hit like a thrown stone. Krog's mouth tightened. Careful, he warned. Varka's eyes flashed. No, she said, I am done being careful. She turned to the hall. Ask yourselves, she called, who benefits from sickness, who benefits from war? Humans fear us, yes, but they also fear the pass. If we die, the pass opens. If we rage, humans march and Krog leads you into blades. Krog snarled and stepped forward. And in that moment, Eamon saw it, the slight bulge beneath Krog's cloak, the shape of a sealed pouch. Paper. Eamon's mind snapped into place like a lock clicking shut. He moved before he knew he was moving. He lunged not at Krog's throat, not with his axe, but with his hand. He caught the edge of Krog's cloak and yanked. The pouch tore loose and spilled onto the stone floor. A wooden seal clattered and rolled. Tower, hawk, the Duke's crest. The hall went utterly silent. Even the sick orcs seemed to hold their breath. Krog's face changed, smoothness falling away, revealing naked fury. Eamon picked up the seal, heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his teeth. He held it up. This, he said, voice echoing in the cavern, is what your spirits look like when they wear a noble's ring. Varka's eyes locked on Krog and her voice was quiet, deadly. You kept it, she said, so you could use it again. Krog bared his teeth. Fools, he spat. You think the Duke will stop because you found a stamp? He will send more, he will send fire. Better to strike first, better to take their towns, their mills, their fat stores. The chieftain rose with effort, shaking, rage burning through fever. You would lead us into slaughter, he growled. Krog's gaze flicked around, realizing too late the tide had turned. His hand went to a knife. Ruln moved like thunder. He struck Krog with the flat of his axe handle, sending him sprawling. Spears pinned him before he hit the ground. Krog screamed, not in pain but in outrage, as if the world had broken a rule by refusing him. Varka stood over him, breathing hard, eyes bright and fierce. You branded me traitor, she said, but you were the one who sold our blood. Krog spat. You are still traitor, he hissed. You brought human into our hall. Varka looked at Eamon. Eamon held the seal, feeling the weight of it like a stone in his hand, proof, yes, but also a promise of what would come next. The Duke would not like his secrets dragged into the open. Men like Warwick didn't forgive, they erased. Varka turned back to Krog and her voice carried to the whole hall. If protecting our people is treason, she said, then I will wear the word like armor. A roar rose, not of anger but of approval. Orcs pounded fists against stone. Sick warriors lifted trembling hands in solidarity. The chieftain's gaze fixed on Varka's wrist. His face tightened with something like shame. Remove it, he rasped. A hush fell. Varka's eyes widened. The chieftain nodded to an elder shaman who stepped forward with a heated blade. The shaman looked at Varka, and for the first time there was gentleness in an orc hand reaching for her. It will hurt, the shaman warned. Varka lifted her chin. I have had worse. Eamon wanted to look away. He didn't. Blade pressed to the brand. Varka's muscles locked. She didn't scream. Her breath came in tight, controlled bursts, eyes fixed on the fire like she was wrestling the pain into submission. When it was done, the word was gone, scarred over, but no longer a sentence. Varka swayed. Eamon stepped forward instinctively, ready to catch her, but she steadied herself before he could touch her. Pride still mattered. Even now, the chieftain's voice was heavy. "We owe you," he said to Varka. Then his gaze shifted to, "And we owe you, human," Eamon swallowed. "Just don't start a war," he said. The chieftain's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "War is coming," he said, "but we will choose how to face it." Varka's eyes narrowed. "We take this seal to the Duke," she said. "We force him to answer." Eamon felt the cold truth of that plan. "He'll deny it," he said, "or kill you, or both." Varka's voice was steel. "Then we show humans what their leaders do," she said. "Not with raids, with truth." Eamon stared at her. In Hearthrun, truth was a fragile thing. It was always getting crushed under boots. But here in a stone hall full of warriors, truth had weight. It could become a weapon. Eamon exhaled. "All right," he said, "then we do it smart." Varka's gaze met his, and in it he saw something that hadn't been there in the snow. Trust, hard-earned, bright as fire in winter. They left Stonejaw 2 days later, not as outcasts and strangers, but as an unlikely pair carrying a seal that could light the border on fire. Roln escorted them to the ridge and stopped. "Human," he grunted at Eamon, then glanced at Varka. "If you betray her, I will find you." Eamon nodded. "Fair." Roln looked at Varka. For a moment his fierce expression softened. "You are Stonejaw," he said. "No brand changes that." Varka's throat worked. She nodded once. "And you are stubborn," she said. "No winter changes that." Roln snorted, a laugh maybe, and turned back toward the mountains. Eamon and Varka walked on. At the crest of the ridge, Varka paused and looked back at the pass, smoke curling from the clan's homes like thin prayers. Then she looked at Eamon. "You could have left me," she said quietly. "In snow." Eamon shrugged, uncomfortable. "Could have," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" she pressed. Eamon stared out at the white world trees like dark spears, the river cutting a frozen line through everything. He thought of Milo's wooden bear. He thought of Warwick's smile. Thought of the word cleansing stamped like an excuse on a barrel of death. Then he looked at Varka, scarred wrist, stubborn eyes, a life that refused to be politely erased. "Because," he said, "I'm tired of powerful men deciding who gets to live." Varka studied him as if committing the sentence to memory. Then slowly she extended her hand, palm up, not a warrior's grip, not a clan gesture, an offering. Eamon hesitated only a heartbeat before placing his hand in hers. Her skin was warm now. Not fire warm, not fever warm, alive warm. They walked down the ridge together toward the town, toward the Duke's walls, toward whatever storm came next. Two people from opposite sides of a line on a map, carrying proof that could topple a lie. Behind them the snow fell quietly, trying again to erase footprints. It didn't succeed.